Before we begin, if you're listening to this alone at night, you're exactly where you should be. Subscribe and turn on notifications for more true horror stories, disturbing encounters, and unexplained events uploaded every day. Now lock your doors, turn off the lights, and let's get into tonight's stories. If you spend enough time on the water, you learn to trust navigation markers. Red buoys, green buoys, channel markers, hazard signs. They're there because someone already made the mistake, so you don't have to. My grandfather used to tell me, never ignore a buoy. I always thought he meant rocks, or shallow water. Now, I'm pretty sure he meant something else, because one September afternoon, I found a red buoy that wasn't on any chart. The strange part wasn't that it had appeared. It was that, every time I tried to leave, it was still waiting for me. This happened during Labor Day weekend in 2022. My best friend, Tyler, had just bought his first center console fishing boat. Nothing fancy, 20 feet long, single outboard, big enough for a few days on the lake. We'd planned the trip for months. 3 days, 2 nights, no schedules, just fishing, swimming, and sleeping in a small marina cabin. The lake sat in northern Georgia, large enough that you couldn't see every shoreline at once. Hundreds of coves, small islands, long stretches of open water. Exactly the kind of place where you could disappear for an entire weekend. Saturday morning started perfectly. Blue skies, barely any wind. The marina was busy with families launching boats, kids jumping off docks, music playing from pontoons. Everything felt normal. By noon, we'd already caught several striped bass. Tyler wanted to explore farther north, where the lake narrowed into an old river channel. Neither of us had been there before. The navigation chart showed deep water all the way through. No hazards, no warnings, nothing. About an hour later, boat traffic disappeared. The shoreline became heavily wooded. Steep rock walls replaced vacation homes. Even the water changed color. Instead of the usual green, it looked almost black. Tyler joked, "Feels like we crossed into another lake." I laughed, mostly because I was thinking the exact same thing. The first unusual thing we noticed was the silence. No jet skis, no wake from other boats, no birds flying overhead. Even our voices sounded different, like the cliffs were swallowing the echoes. Then Tyler pointed ahead. Was that buoy on the map? About 100 yards away, a red navigation buoy floated near the middle of the channel. Nothing unusual, except it wasn't marked with a number. Every buoy on the lake had identification plates. This one didn't, just faded red paint, scratches, and a heavy chain disappearing beneath the water. Reasonable explanation? The Corps of Engineers had replaced an old marker. Simple. We slowed as we passed. That's when I noticed something odd. The buoy wasn't moving. Even though our wake rocked the entire channel, the buoy remained perfectly still. Not even a ripple. Tyler circled it once. I've never seen one anchored that solid. Neither had I. We continued north. About 20 minutes later, the river widened again. We found another cove, dropped our lines, started fishing. Everything felt normal, until I looked behind us. The same red buoy floated near the mouth of the cove. I frowned. Did we turn around? Tyler checked the GPS. No, the track clearly showed we'd continued north. There shouldn't have been another buoy, especially not the same one. We pulled anchor, headed south. Within 15 minutes, the channel opened exactly where we'd entered. Only, the buoy waited there again. Same faded paint, same missing number, same chain disappearing into black water. Neither of us said much after that. We simply kept driving. The marina should have appeared within 30 minutes. It didn't. Instead, the cliffs grew taller, the water became narrower, and every few minutes, the same buoy appeared ahead. Never beside us, always ahead, like we were catching up to it. Tyler finally shut off the engine. This isn't right. He restarted the GPS. The screen froze. Every waypoint disappeared. Only one icon remained. A red dot, exactly where the buoy floated. My phone showed no service. His didn't either. The afternoon sky slowly darkened. Clouds rolled overhead. Not storm clouds, just heavy gray clouds that seemed to block every bit of sunlight. Then, we heard another engine. Relief hit immediately. Another boat. Finally. The sound echoed around the cliffs. Closer, closer. Then, nothing. No boat appeared. Only the engine, idling somewhere beyond the next bend. Tyler stood. Hello. Silence. Then, one short horn blast. Not loud, just enough to hear. I answered instinctively with our horn. One blast. Immediately, the engine sound stopped. Complete silence returned. The buoy drifted closer, not floating with the current, moving, slowly, purposefully, toward our boat. Neither of us touched the water. Neither of us spoke. It stopped about 30 feet away, still perfectly upright, still perfectly motionless. Something bumped our hull, softly, from underneath. Once. Several seconds later, another bump. Tyler looked over the side. I don't see anything. Then, the depth finder alarm sounded. The display read, 312 feet. I stared at it. The chart showed the channel was barely 90 feet deep. The number stayed there, then disappeared. Without warning, the outboard started itself. Neither of us had turned the key. The engine idled smoothly, as though someone else had done it. Tyler didn't hesitate. He pushed the throttle forward. The boat surged ahead. This time, the shoreline finally began changing. Vacation homes appeared. Other boats. Jet skis. Noise. Everything returned. The marina came into view just before sunset. People laughed on the docks. Kids jumped into the water. Life continued exactly as if nothing had happened. That evening, we asked the dockmaster about the unnumbered buoy. He stared at us for a moment. What buoy? The red one north of Miller Channel. There aren't any red buoys there. He pulled out a laminated navigation chart. The entire stretch of water contained only green markers. No red ones. None. I assumed he'd made a mistake, until another older man sitting nearby quietly joined the conversation. He looked at Tyler, then at me, finally asked, "Did you answer the horn?" Neither of us spoke. He nodded anyway. I figured. He stood, picked up his coffee. Before walking away, he said one sentence I'll never forget. "Next time, keep going. Don't answer back." We packed before sunrise. Neither of us wanted another day on the lake. About 6 months later, I downloaded updated navigation charts for my boat. Curious, I searched satellite imagery of the northern channel. Near the exact place we'd found the buoy, someone had left a user comment. No photograph, no explanation, just 4 words. Do not sound horn. Tyler sold the boat the following spring. He told everyone maintenance costs had become too expensive. That wasn't the reason. The real reason was much simpler. Neither of us wanted to be on open water again, wondering whether the next red buoy we passed was actually supposed to be there. If you've spent any time around boats, you know what a no-wake zone is. Idle speed, no large waves. Watch for swimmers. Watch for docks. Simple. Every marina has them. Every experienced boater follows them. But a few summers ago, I entered a no-wake zone that didn't exist on any map. The strange part wasn't finding it. It was that every other boat around me disappeared the moment I crossed into it. This happened in July of 2021. My cousin Matt and I had rented a 24-foot pontoon boat for a weekend on Kentucky Lake. Neither of us owned a boat large enough for overnight trips, so every summer we'd rent one for a few days. Fish during the mornings, cruise in the afternoons, anchor in quiet coves until sunset. Nothing complicated, just an excuse to get away from work. Saturday started exactly the way you'd expect. Bright blue sky, warm weather, hundreds of boats already on the water, families pulling tubes, bass fishermen racing toward their spots, houseboats moving between marinas. The lake felt alive. Around noon, we decided to explore a section neither of us had visited before. According to the GPS, an old river channel branched into several narrow inlets. The satellite images showed abandoned docks, collapsed boathouses, and shoreline that hadn't been developed. Perfect place to avoid the crowds. The farther we traveled, the fewer boats we saw. Soon, there weren't any. Only trees, old wooden docks, and quiet water stretching between them. About 20 minutes later, Matt pointed ahead. Did you see that sign? A white metal marker stood near the center of the channel. Printed in faded black letters were 3 words. No wake zone. No agency logo. No marker number. No reflective tape. Just those words. Reasonable explanation? An old private marina. Maybe a forgotten subdivision. Nothing unusual. We slowed to idle speed, passed the sign, continued deeper into the inlet. Almost immediately, everything changed. The air felt noticeably colder. The breeze disappeared. Even the sound of our engine seemed quieter. Not muffled. Just farther away somehow. Matt looked behind us. Where'd everybody go? I turned. The entrance to the inlet remained visible. The main lake shimmered beneath the afternoon sun. But there weren't any boats anymore. Not one. 5 minutes earlier, the water had been packed. Now, nothing. I checked my phone. No service. Odd. We'd had full signal only moments before. The inlet eventually opened into a small bay. At least a dozen old docks lined the shoreline. Most had collapsed. Several boat lifts sat half-submerged beneath the water. It looked like an entire neighborhood had been abandoned years earlier. One thing immediately stood out. Every dock still had ropes tied neatly to the cleats, as if someone expected boats to return. Matt pointed toward the far shore. You seeing that? A small white speedboat floated beside one of the docks. No people. No motor running. No movement. The boat looked surprisingly clean compared to everything else. Almost new. We idled closer. The registration numbers had been scratched off. Every compartment stood open. A life jacket rested neatly on one seat. The ignition key still hung in the dashboard. Whoever owned it hadn't left in a hurry. They'd simply left. Matt suggested towing it back to the marina. I wasn't comfortable touching it. Something about the place felt wrong. Too quiet. Too still. Then, we heard laughter. Children laughing. Somewhere beyond the trees. Not loud. Just faint enough to carry across the water. We both looked toward the shoreline. Nothing moved. The laughter stopped. As we turned the pontoon around, I noticed another boat, an old cabin cruiser, anchored farther down the bay. Empty. Then another. A fishing boat. Empty. Then another. By the time we'd completed the turn, I counted 7 abandoned boats, all floating quietly, all perfectly intact. None tied to docks. None showing signs of damage. Just waiting. Matt quietly said, "We need to leave." I agreed. We followed the channel back exactly the way we'd entered. Or at least, we thought we did. After nearly 20 minutes, the inlet should have ended. Instead, another "No Wake Zone" sign appeared. Same faded paint. Same rusted post. Same words. Matt laughed nervously. Didn't we already pass that? Neither of us answered. The GPS map froze. Our boat icon disappeared completely. Only blue water remained. No shoreline. No depth lines. Nothing. Then, our radio crackled. Static. More static. Finally, a voice. Calm. Professional. Vessel entering the marina. Proceed to slip 21. I picked up the microphone. We're not at a marina. No answer. Only static. A few seconds later, the same voice repeated the exact message. Word for word. The sun hadn't moved. It remained in exactly the same spot above the trees. I checked my watch. It read 2:18. Matt looked at his. Also 2:18. 10 minutes later, both watches still read 2:18. The engine suddenly sputtered. Then died. Complete silence. We drifted. The current carried us toward another old dock. As we approached, I noticed fresh footprints on the weathered boards. Bare feet. Still wet. Leading from the water. To the shore. None leading back. Then, someone knocked. 3 slow knocks. From underneath the pontoon. Not against the side. Underneath. Knock. 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 Matt froze. Neither of us moved. Another 3 knocks. Closer to the bow this time. Moving beneath the boat. Slowly. Without warning, the engine restarted. By itself. Exactly like the previous story. Matt shoved the throttle forward. We accelerated harder than either of us had intended. The pontoon surged past the dock. Past the abandoned boats. Past another "No Wake" sign. Then, suddenly, we were back on the main lake. Bright sunlight. Jet skis. Wakeboarders. Music. Hundreds of boats. Everything exactly as we'd left it. We looked at our watches. 2:19. Only 1 minute had passed. That evening, back at the rental cabin, I searched online for old satellite imagery of that section of the lake. Eventually, I found a historical map from before the reservoir existed, before the river had been dammed. Right where we'd entered the inlet, there had once been a small town, complete with a marina. There used to be. What happened? It flooded. When the dam was built, he shrugged. Everything's still down there. I nodded, then asked one last question. Did it have numbered slips? He frowned. Yeah, 21 was the fuel dock. Neither of us had mentioned slip 21. I haven't rented another boat since. Not because I'm afraid of deep water, or storms, or mechanical failures. Those things make sense. What still bothers me is the radio, because every now and then, when I'm driving with nothing on, my truck radio will suddenly fill with static. Then, a calm voice will quietly say, "Vessel entering the marina. Proceed to slip 21. I always change the station immediately, because I'm not interested in finding out what's still waiting inside a marina that sank decades ago. Every boater has done it. You're out later than you planned. The sun drops faster than expected. You start looking for the nearest marina before it gets completely dark. Normally, that's easy. The navigation lights guide you in. The fuel dock stays lit. You'll usually hear music, people laughing, someone loading a trailer. A marina is one of the safest places to be after sunset. At least, that's what I believed, until I tied my boat to a marina that no one else could find the next morning. This happened in August of 2023. My brother Josh and I had spent nearly 6 months restoring a 1988 Sea Ray cabin cruiser. It wasn't worth much, but it had belonged to our father. After he passed away, we promised we'd get it back on the water. That August, it finally happened. We planned a weekend trip on a large reservoir in Tennessee. Nothing ambitious, just 60 miles over 2 days. Fishing, swimming, anchoring in quiet coves, then returning Sunday afternoon. Everything went exactly according to plan, until Saturday evening. Around 6, dark clouds appeared in the distance. The weather app showed scattered storms. Nothing serious. We decided to head toward the nearest marina anyway. The chart showed one only 12 miles away. Harbor Point Marina. Fuel, restaurant, cabins. Perfect place to wait out bad weather. The ride started normally. The lake was busy. Wakeboard boats, pontoon rentals, base fishermen heading home. As the sun dropped, the traffic slowly disappeared. Within half an hour, we were alone. Josh checked the GPS. Another 3 miles. Easy enough. Then, the chart plotter froze. The boat icon stopped moving. Everything else continued working. Depth finder, compass, engine gauges. Just not the map. Fortunately, we could already see marina lights in the distance. Long wooden docks, bright white floodlights, fuel pumps, exactly where the GPS said Harbor Point should be. We tied up just after sunset. Everything looked normal, maybe a little older than expected. The fuel pumps looked worn. The docks creaked beneath every step. Only 3 other boats sat in their slips. An old houseboat, a small fishing boat, a blue cabin cruiser. Nobody stood outside. No music, no restaurant noise, nothing. A bell rang somewhere inside the office. One slow ring, then silence. Josh walked toward the fuel dock. "I'll see if anyone's here." He returned about 5 minutes later. "The office is open. Anybody?" "No. Coffee's still hot." That made me pause. We walked together. The office lights remained on. A fan slowly turned behind the counter. Fresh coffee sat in the pot. A receipt printer still glowed green. Someone had left a sandwich half-finished on a paper plate. The cash drawer stood open. Yet, there wasn't another person anywhere. We called out. Nothing. A guest register rested beside the entrance. The last signature caught my attention. August 17th. Today's date. Someone had checked in only a few hours earlier. The handwriting looked rushed. Beneath the signature, instead of a room number, the guest had written, "Left before dark." Neither of us mentioned it. The storm finally reached the lake around 9. Heavy rain, strong wind, lightning flashing over the water. Leaving wasn't an option. We decided to sleep aboard the boat. Around midnight, I woke because someone was walking down the dock. Heavy boots. Slow, confident, The footsteps stopped beside our slip. I looked through the cabin window. A man stood beneath the dock light. Yellow raincoat, marina cap, hands in his pockets. His face remained hidden by the brim. He looked toward our boat, then quietly said, "You're in the wrong slip." I slid open the cabin window. "Sorry?" He pointed toward the water. "Slip 27. This one's already taken." I looked around. Every other slip was empty. When I looked back, the man had already started walking away. His boots echoed across the dock. Then, stopped. No more footsteps. The next morning, the storm had passed. Blue sky, calm water. We stepped onto the dock. Everything looked different. The floodlights were gone. The office building had disappeared. The fuel pumps were gone. Only broken wooden pilings remained above the water. We weren't tied to a marina anymore. We were tied to the remains of one. The old docks had collapsed years earlier. Grass grew through cracked concrete. The office roof had caved in. Windows were missing. Trees had grown through the parking lot. Nothing looked occupied. Nothing. Josh slowly untied the lines. Neither of us said a word. About 30 minutes later, we reached another marina. A modern one. Busy. People fueling boats. Kids buying ice cream. Exactly what you'd expect. We asked the dockmaster about Harbor Point. He looked confused. "There isn't a Harbor Point anymore." "What happened?" He pointed across the lake. "The old marina? It closed after the flood." "When?" 1998. I laughed nervously. "We stayed there last night." His expression didn't change. "No, you didn't." He walked into the office, returned carrying an old framed photograph. The picture showed Harbor Point Marina before it closed. The office, fuel dock, restaurant, exactly as we'd seen it. Standing beside the fuel pumps, wearing a yellow raincoat, was the same man who'd spoken to us. The caption underneath identified him. Harbor Master, Thomas Keller, 1956 to 1998. I felt cold despite the August heat. Before leaving, I asked one final question. "What happened to him?" The dockmaster sighed. "He refused to leave during the flood. He stayed behind trying to untie boats before the docks broke apart. They never found him." That evening, back home, Josh texted me a photograph he'd taken during the trip. It showed our Sea Ray tied up at the marina after sunset. The picture looked normal, at first. Then I zoomed in. Every slip around us was occupied. Not by modern boats, by boats from another era. Wooden runabouts, old cabin cruisers, classic fishing boats, all perfectly clean, all tied neatly to the docks. Standing at the end of every pier was someone watching the water. None of them looked toward the camera, except one, the man in the yellow raincoat. I deleted the photograph. A week later, it reappeared in my phone. I deleted it again. It came back. Josh admitted the same thing was happening to him. Neither of us talks about it anymore. Last spring, I attended a local boat show. One booth displayed historical photographs of marina, the exact same photograph. Only this time, there was one extra boat tied to slip 27, a white 1988 Sea Ray. Our boat. I left without saying.